An Omega in chains. An Alpha King filled with rage. One command that would reveal the biggest secret in werewolf history. What happens when the girl you're about to execute for treason turns out to be your long-lost sister? And then, plot twist. She's not actually your sister. She's your fated mate. If your jaw isn't on the floor in the first 5 minutes of this story, I'll eat my microphone. So, smash that subscribe button, ring that bell, and buckle up for the most insane werewolf romance you've ever heard. Because sometimes, the Omega everyone ignores is actually the most powerful wolf alive. And her awakening? It's about to change everything. Let's begin. The Omega girl knew she was going to die tonight. She just didn't know she was actually a princess. Thunder crashed outside the Moon Court Palace like giant drums in the sky, making the stained glass windows shake. Inside the Grand Judgment Hall, hundreds of werewolves stood perfectly still, watching and waiting. The air felt thick and heavy, like right before something really bad happens. You know that feeling when you're about to get in trouble and your stomach feels all twisted up. That's how everyone in the room felt, but way, way worse. The massive golden doors at the end of the hall suddenly flew open with a boom that echoed off the marble walls. 2 guards in shiny silver armor marched in, dragging someone between them. It was a young woman, maybe 18 years old, and she looked terrible. Her dark hair, which probably used to be pretty and soft, was now all tangled up with dirt and leaves stuck in it. Her clothes were ripped and muddy, and heavy iron chains wrapped around her wrists, making awful clanking sounds with every step. She was an Omega, and in the werewolf kingdom, that meant she was nobody important. Actually, it meant she was less than nobody. Werewolves had 3 main types. Alphas were the strongest and most powerful, like superheroes. Betas were normal, like regular people. But Omegas, they were treated worse than servants. They couldn't own anything, couldn't go to school, and most wolves acted like they were invisible shadows that didn't matter at all. The fancy wolves in the hall, wearing silk dresses and velvet suits that probably cost more money than most people see in their whole lives, all stepped back as the guards dragged the Omega girl past them. Some covered their noses with perfumed handkerchiefs, acting like she smelled bad. Others whispered mean things, not even trying to be quiet about it. "Look at that pathetic creature," a woman in a purple gown said, her voice dripping with disgust. "I heard she stole golden coins from the royal treasury," a man whispered to his friend. Can you imagine? An Omega thinking she could steal from the Alpha King himself. "She's either very brave or very stupid," someone else muttered. The Omega girl kept her head down the whole time, her bare feet silent on the cold floor. She didn't look at anyone, didn't say anything, just let the guards pull her along like a broken doll. But if you looked really closely, which most people didn't because they thought she wasn't worth looking at, you could see her whole body shaking, not from the cold, but from fear. At the far end of the hall stood the biggest, most magnificent throne anyone had ever seen. It was carved from a single piece of black stone that sparkled like it had stars trapped inside it. And sitting on that throne was the most feared werewolf in the entire kingdom, Alpha King Rowan. King Rowan was 25 years old, but he seemed older because of how serious and scary he always looked. He had midnight black hair that fell to his shoulders, skin that looked like it was kissed by moonlight, and the most unusual eyes anyone had ever seen. They were silver, like liquid metal, and when he was angry, they literally glowed. He was super tall, super strong, and super handsome, in that dangerous way that made people want to look at him but also run away at the same time. Everyone was terrified of King Rowan. He had become king when he was only 15, after his parents died in a mysterious fire that also destroyed half the palace. That same night, his baby sister, a tiny princess who was only a few months old, disappeared without a trace. Some people said she was kidnapped. Others whispered that she died in the fire. But nobody really knew for sure, and King Rowan had spent the last 10 years searching for answers that never came. The tragedy had changed him. Where once there might have been a kind prince, now there was only a cold, angry king who trusted nobody and showed mercy to even fewer. He ruled with an iron fist, and breaking his laws meant facing punishments that made grown wolves cry just thinking about them. "Stop!" King Rowan commanded, his deep voice filling the entire hall like rolling thunder. The guards immediately stopped walking, yanking the Omega girl to a halt so roughly that she stumbled and almost fell. She caught herself at the last second, the chains around her wrists clanking loudly in the sudden silence. King Rowan stood up from his throne, and even though he was far away, everyone in the hall took an involuntary step backward. He moved like a predator, smooth, dangerous, and completely in control. His long black cape flowed behind him as he walked down the steps from his throne, his boots clicking against the marble with each deliberate step. "So," he said, his silver eyes fixed on the Omega girl like a hawk watching a mouse. "This is the thief who dared to steal from the royal treasury." The Omega girl still didn't look up, her shoulders hunched forward like she was trying to make herself smaller, trying to disappear completely. "Captain Marcus!" King Rowan called out, and a soldier in extra fancy armor stepped forward. "Tell the court what this Omega has done." Captain Marcus cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, this Omega was caught red-handed in the royal treasury 3 nights ago. The night guards found her with her pockets full of golden coins bearing your royal seal. When they tried to arrest her, she attempted to flee, proving her guilt." Gasps echoed through the hall. Stealing was bad enough, but stealing from the king, and then trying to run away? That was basically asking for the worst punishment possible. King Rowan circled the Omega girl slowly, like a shark swimming around its prey. "Do you know what the punishment is for stealing from the crown?" he asked, his voice soft, but somehow more terrifying than if he had yelled. The Omega girl's shoulders shook harder, but she still didn't speak. "Death," King Rowan said simply. "The punishment is death." More gasps from the crowd. Some of the fancier ladies pretended to faint, fanning themselves dramatically. The Omega girl's knees buckled slightly, but the guards held her up. "However," the king continued, "I am feeling generous tonight. I will give you one chance to explain yourself. Look at me and tell me why you did it." For the first time, the Omega girl slowly raised her head. The crowd leaned forward, curious to see the face of someone brave or stupid enough to steal from the Alpha King. She was beautiful, even covered in dirt and tears. She had delicate features, high cheekbones, and the biggest, saddest silver eyes anyone had ever seen. Wait, silver eyes? That was weird. Most Omegas had brown or blue eyes. Silver eyes were super rare, usually only seen in... But before anyone could finish that thought, King Rowan spoke again, his voice sharp with impatience. "I'm waiting. Speak, Omega. Or have you lost your tongue along with your sense?" The Omega girl opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her lips trembled, and tears rolled down her dirty cheeks, leaving clean tracks on her skin. She tried again, but still, nothing. It was like fear had stolen her voice completely. The wolves in the crowd started whispering again, and their words weren't nice at all. "Look at her. Too scared to even talk. Pathetic Omega. Can't even defend herself. She's probably too stupid to speak properly anyway." King Rowan's patience, which was never very good to begin with, finally snapped. His silver eyes flashed with anger, actually glowing in the candlelight like 2 angry stars. "Fine," he said coldly. "If you won't speak to defend yourself, then we'll let your actions speak for you. Guards!" The 2 guards holding the Omega girl stood at attention. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Strip her." The word hung in the air like a sword about to fall. The entire hall went dead silent. Did the king really just say what they thought he said? "Let everyone see what happens to thieves in my kingdom," King Rowan continued, his voice hard as stone. "Let them see the Omega who thought she could steal from me and get away with it. Strip her and let her shame be visible to all." The Omega girl's silver eyes went wide with terror. "No," she whispered, so quietly that only those closest to her could hear. "Please, no." But the guards, though they looked uncomfortable, had to obey their king. They reached for her torn shirt, and the crowd watched with a mixture of excitement and horror. Some people looked away, not wanting to watch. Others leaned forward, eager to see the Omega's humiliation. The guards grabbed the fabric of her shirt and pulled. The material ripped easily. It was already so worn and torn that it came apart like tissue paper. But as the fabric fell away from her shoulders, something impossible happened. A golden light suddenly filled the hall, so bright that everyone had to shield their eyes. It was coming from the Omega girl, specifically from a mark on her collarbone that was glowing like a tiny sun. "What in the name of the moon goddess?" someone breathed. As the light dimmed enough for people to see, gasps of shock echoed through the hall. There, on the Omega girl's skin, right above her heart, was a mark that everyone recognized. It was the Royal Crest of the Moonborn Line, a crescent moon wrapped around a wolf's head, with ancient symbols that meant "blessed by the moon," written in the old language. But that was impossible. Only direct descendants of the first Alpha King could carry that mark. It appeared on royal babies when they were born, and could never be faked or copied. The magic of the mark was so old and powerful that anyone who tried to forge it would be struck dead immediately. King Rowan stumbled backward like someone had punched him in the stomach. His silver eyes were wider than anyone had ever seen them, and for the first time in 10 years, the cold, emotionless mask he always wore completely shattered. "No," he whispered, his voice breaking. "It can't be." The Omega girl looked down at the glowing mark on her skin, seeming just as surprised as everyone else. She touched it gently with her fingertips, and the golden light pulsed brighter for a moment. "Where did you get that mark?" King Rowan demanded, his voice shaking. He stepped closer to her, his hands trembling. "Where did you get it?" The Omega girl looked up at him with those silver eyes that were exactly the same shade as his own, and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. I've always had it, since I was born. The people who raised me said it was just a birthmark, something to keep hidden because it made me different. They said if anyone saw it, bad things would happen to me." King Rowan's mind was racing, memories flooding back like a dam had broken in his head. 18 years ago, the night of the Great Fire, his parents dying, his baby sister, Princess Lyra, vanishing without a trace. They had searched everywhere, followed every lead, but she had simply disappeared like smoke in the wind. Could it be? Could this Omega girl actually be? "What's your name?" he asked urgently. "What do they call you?" I don't really have one," she said softly. "The rogues who raised me just called me Girl, or Omega. But sometimes when she thought I was asleep, the old woman who took care of me would call me something else. She would stroke my hair and whisper, 'Lyra, sweet Lyra,' over and over." The hall erupted in chaos. People were shouting, gasping, some even screaming. The Omega girl, no, not an Omega girl, but possibly the lost princess, stood there looking confused and scared, not understanding why everyone was freaking out. King Rowan fell to his knees right there in front of everyone. The proud, terrifying Alpha King actually dropped to his knees on the cold marble floor, his head bowed. "Release her," he commanded, his voice rough with emotion. "Release her immediately." The guards looked at each other, totally confused. "But, Your Majesty, she's a thief." "I said release her!" Rowan roared, and his alpha voice was so powerful that every wolf in the room, even the other alphas, felt compelled to bow their heads in submission. The guards quickly unlocked the chains, and they fell to the floor with a loud clang. The girl rubbed her bruised wrists, still looking lost and afraid. "Your Highness," King Rowan said, still on his knees. "Princess Lyra, my sister. Please, forgive me. Forgive us all." The girl, who might be Princess Lyra, stood frozen, like her brain couldn't process what was happening. 1 minute she was about to be executed for stealing, and now the king was on his knees calling her, "Your Highness." It didn't make any sense. I don't understand," she stammered, backing away slowly. "This is some kind of trick, right? You're playing with me before you kill me." Rowan looked up at her, and everyone in the hall gasped again, because the cold, heartless king had actual tears in his silver eyes. "No trick," he said softly. "The mark never lies. You're my sister, Lyra. You're the lost princess everyone thought was dead." "But that's impossible," she protested. "I'm nobody. I'm just an Omega who grew up with rogues in the forest. I lived in a shack that leaked when it rained. I had to steal food just to survive. Princesses don't live like that." An elderly wolf in long robes stepped forward from the crowd. It was Sage Matthias, the oldest and wisest wolf in the kingdom, who remembered things from almost 100 years ago. "May I examine the mark, Your Majesty?" he asked King Rowan. Rowan nodded and stood up, gesturing for the sage to approach. The old wolf walked slowly to the girl, his ancient eyes studying the glowing crest on her skin. "Remarkable," he breathed. "It's not just the royal mark, it's the supreme royal mark. See these extra symbols around the edge? They only appear on those destined to be the most powerful rulers in our bloodline. In all our history, only 3 wolves have carried this exact mark." He turned to address the crowd. "This is indeed Princess Lyra, daughter of the late King Alexander and Queen Serena, sister to King Rowan, and the rightful heir to the Moonborn throne." "Wait, what?" Lyra said, her voice squeaking. "Heir to the throne? But Rowan is the king." "I am king because you were gone," Rowan explained, his voice gentle now in a way nobody had ever heard before. "You're my elder sister by 2 years. According to our laws, the throne should have been yours when you turned 18. I've only been keeping it warm for you." The hall was buzzing with shocked conversations now. Some wolves looked excited, others worried, and a few looked really, really angry, especially some of the nobles who had gotten used to having King Rowan's favor. "This changes everything," someone whispered. "An Omega as our queen? That's never happened before." "But she's not really an Omega. She's a royal alpha. The mark proves it." "How do we know it's really her? Maybe it's some kind of magic trick." As if responding to the doubts, the mark on Lyra's skin pulsed brighter, and suddenly the air in the hall changed. A powerful presence filled the room, something ancient and magnificent that made every wolf want to bare their throat in submission. Even King Rowan felt it, the awakening of an alpha power that had been sleeping inside the girl all along. Lyra gasped, her silver eyes beginning to glow just like her brother's. "What's happening to me?" she asked, panic in her voice. "Something's wrong. I feel different." "Nothing's wrong," Sage Matthias said with wonder in his voice. "Your true nature is awakening. You were never really an Omega, princess. That was just a disguise, a protection that hid your real power. You're an alpha, perhaps the most powerful alpha born in centuries." To prove his point, Lyra's whole appearance began to change. Her tangled hair smoothed out and began to shine like black silk. Her hunched, submissive posture straightened until she stood tall and proud. The weakness in her scent transformed into something powerful and commanding. Even her voice, when she spoke again, had changed from timid to strong. "I remember something," she said slowly, her eyes distant, like she was seeing something far away. Fire. There was so much fire, and someone carrying me, running through the smoke. A woman's voice saying, "Keep her safe, hide her power, don't let them find her until she's ready." Then, nothing, just growing up in the forest with the old woman who found me by a river. King Rowan stepped closer to his sister, his expression soft with a mixture of joy and pain. "We searched everywhere for you. I've spent 10 years following every rumor, every possible lead. I never gave up hope that you were alive somewhere." 10 years, Lyra repeated softly. "You looked for me for 10 years. "I would have looked forever," Rowan said simply. For a moment the two siblings just stared at each other, silver eyes meeting silver eyes. Then, surprising everyone, including herself, Lyra stepped forward and hugged her brother. Rowan froze for a second. He wasn't exactly known for being huggy, but then his arms came up and he hugged her back, holding her like he was afraid she might disappear again. The hall was silent, watching this impossible moment, their terrifying king showing actual human emotion, embracing the sister everyone thought was dead. But then Rowan pulled back slightly, and his expression became complicated. There was something else in his eyes now, something that made several wolves in the crowd exchange knowing looks. "There's something else," he said quietly, but his voice carried through the silent hall. "What else could there possibly be?" Lyra asked, looking worried. "Isn't finding out I'm a long-lost princess enough surprises for one night?" Rowan took a deep breath, and for the first time in his life, he looked genuinely nervous. The king who had faced down enemy armies and killed challengers with his bare hands was nervous about talking to this girl who had been an Omega 5 minutes ago. "The mark on your skin isn't just glowing randomly," he said carefully. "It's responding to something, or rather, someone." "What do you mean?" Lyra asked, but even as she said it, she noticed something weird. The golden mark on her skin was pulsing in a rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. And strangest of all, she could swear she saw an answering glow coming from under Rowan's shirt, right where his heart was. "Show them," Sage Matthias said quietly to the king. "The truth must be revealed." Looking deeply uncomfortable, which was weird, because King Rowan never looked uncomfortable about anything, Rowan pulled aside his shirt to reveal his own chest. There, in the exact same spot as Lyra's mark, was another Royal Crest, glowing with the same golden light and pulsing in perfect harmony with hers. The crowd gasped so loud, it sounded like a windstorm. "No way," someone breathed. "It's the mate bond," another whispered in awe. "But they're siblings," someone else protested. Sage Matthias raised his hand for silence. "They are not blood siblings," he announced, his old voice carrying clearly through the hall. "I have suspected this for years, but now with both of them here, I can confirm it." "What?" Rowan and Lyra said at exactly the same time, turning to stare at the old sage. "King Alexander and Queen Serena could not have children of their own," Matthias explained. "It was a closely guarded secret. Both of you were adopted as babies, chosen by the moon goddess herself, and marked with the Royal Crest to show you were destined to rule. You were raised as siblings, but you share no blood relation." Lyra's head was spinning. "So I'm not really a princess?" "You are a princess," Matthias corrected firmly. "The mark makes you royal, not blood. The moon goddess herself chose you. That makes you more legitimate than any bloodline could." "But what about the glowing?" Rowan asked, though he looked like he already knew the answer and really wished he didn't. "You know what it means, Your Majesty," Matthias said simply. "The marks recognize each other. The moon goddess paired you together from the beginning. You are true mates." If the hall was chaos before, now it was complete pandemonium. True mates were super rare, like 1 in a million rare. It meant the moon goddess had specifically created 2 souls to be perfect for each other, and for those mates to both carry the royal mark. That had never happened in recorded history. "But we thought we were siblings," Lyra squeaked, her face turning red. "This is so weird." "The moon goddess works in mysterious ways," Matthias said wisely. "You were raised apart, precisely so this wouldn't be weird when you found each other again. King Rowan never knew you as a sister. He only knew you were missing. And you, princess, never knew him at all." Rowan was staring at Lyra with an expression nobody had ever seen on his face before. It was like someone had hit him with a brick made of feelings. "That's why," he said softly, more to himself than anyone else. "That's why I never gave up searching. It wasn't just about finding my sister. My wolf always knew. It was looking for its mate." "Your wolf?" Lyra asked, and then her eyes widened. "Oh, right! Werewolves! We can turn into actual wolves. I've never been able to do that. The old woman who raised me said my wolf was sleeping and might never wake up. It was hidden, like your alpha nature, Rowan explained. But now that you're here, now that your true self is awakening. He paused, his eyes glowing brighter. Can you feel it? Your wolf stirring inside. Lyra pressed a hand to her chest, her eyes widening with wonder. Yes! Oh my goodness, yes! It's like there's been this empty space inside me my whole life, and suddenly something's filling it. She's there! I can feel her! The mark on her skin pulsed even brighter, and answering pulses of light came from Rowan's mark. The two lights seemed to reach for each other across the space between them. This is unprecedented, someone in the crowd murmured. A lost princess who's also the king's true mate. The power they'll have together. The kingdom will be stronger than ever, another added excitedly. But not everyone looked happy. A woman in an elaborate red dress stepped forward, her pretty face twisted with anger. This was Lady Catherine, who everyone knew had been trying to marry King Rowan for years. This is ridiculous, she snapped. How do we know any of this is real? She could be some imposter with fake magic. And even if she is the lost princess, she's been raised as an omega with rogues. She doesn't know anything about being royal. She can't possibly be our queen. Several other nobles murmured in agreement. They had spent years getting on King Rowan's good side, and now some random girl who had been raised in the woods was going to be more powerful than all of them. They didn't like that one bit. She has a point, Lord Marcus said, stepping forward. He was one of the richest nobles in the kingdom and really didn't want things to change. The girl might have the mark, but she has no training, no education, no idea how to rule. Surely she can't just walk in here and... He was cut off by a sound that made everyone's blood run cold. Lyra was growling. It wasn't an omega's whimper or even a normal wolf's growl. It was the deep, terrifying rumble of an alpha who had been pushed too far. Her silver eyes were now glowing so bright they looked like mini moons, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I might not know how to use the right fork at a fancy. Dinner, Lyra said, her voice carrying a power that made everyone want to kneel. But I know what it's like to be hungry. I know what it's like to be treated as less than dirt. I know the suffering of the omegas you all ignore. Maybe that's exactly the kind of queen this kingdom needs. The power radiating from her was incredible. Wolves who had never bowed to anyone except King Rowan found themselves dropping to their knees. Even Lady Catherine, despite her anger, couldn't fight the urge to submit. But just as everyone was kneeling before the newfound princess, something strange happened. The golden light from Lyra's mark suddenly flickered, like a candle in the wind. For just a second, instead of warm gold, the light turned deep purple, almost black. Sage Matthias gasped, his ancient eyes widening with what looked like fear. "No," he whispered. "It can't be." "What?" Rowan asked sharply, moving protectively closer to Lyra. "What's wrong?" Before the sage could answer, Lyra cried out in pain. She pressed both hands to her head, her face contorting in agony. "Something's wrong," she gasped. "There's something inside me, something dark. It's waking up too." The mark on her skin flashed between gold and purple now, like two forces were fighting for control. Each purple flash was accompanied by a wave of power so dark and terrible that even the bravest wolves in the hall whimpered in fear. "The Shadow Wolf," Sage Matthias breathed, his face pale with terror. "I thought it was just a legend." "What's the Shadow Wolf?" Rowan demanded, catching Lyra as she swayed on her feet. "An ancient prophecy," Matthias explained quickly, his voice shaking. "It speaks of a royal who would carry both the light of the moon and the darkness of the void. They would have the power to either save our kind or destroy us all. The prophecy said this wolf would be lost and found, raised low but born high, and their awakening would herald a great change." Lyra's eyes snapped open, and for a terrifying moment, they weren't silver anymore. They were pure black, like staring into an endless void. "Hello, little wolves," she said, but it wasn't quite her voice. It was her voice layered with something else, something ancient and powerful and not entirely friendly. "Did you miss me?" Then she blinked, and her eyes were silver again. She looked around in confusion. What What just happened? Why is everyone looking at me like I grew a second head? The prophecy, an old woman in the crowd whispered. She's the shadow phoenix, the one who will bring about the great change. Change? Lady Catherine spat, finding her voice again despite her fear. You mean destruction? Everyone knows the shadow phoenix prophecy is about the end of our world. That's not true, Sage Matthias said firmly. The prophecy speaks of change, not necessarily destruction. It says the shadow phoenix will burn away the old to make room for the new. That could mean many things. Rowan held Lyra steady, his own mark glowing brighter as if trying to help stabilize hers. Whatever it means, he said in his most commanding voice, she is still my mate and your princess. Anyone who threatens her will answer to me. But what if she can't control it? Lord Marcus asked nervously. What if this shadow power takes over and she becomes dangerous? As if responding to his fear, the purple light flashed again, and every candle in the hall went out at once, plunging them into darkness. Several wolves screamed. Then, just as suddenly, the candles relit themselves, but now they burned with purple flames instead of normal orange ones. Okay, that's actually pretty cool, Lyra said, looking at the purple fire with wonder. Then she noticed everyone's terrified faces. Oh, come on! I'm not going to hurt anyone. I don't even know how I did that. The power will need to be trained, Sage Matthias said thoughtfully. Both the royal alpha power and this shadow aspect. It won't be easy, but with proper guidance. I'll help her, Rowan said immediately. Whatever she needs to learn, we'll figure it out together. Lyra looked up at him, and despite everything crazy that had happened, finding out she was a princess, discovering her supposed brother was actually her magical soulmate, and apparently having some kind of scary shadow power, she felt safe. For the first time in her entire life, she felt like she was where she belonged. Together, she agreed softly. Their marks pulsed in unison, gold and purple lights swirling together in a beautiful, terrifying dance. The next morning came way too fast. Lyra had been given a room in the palace, a huge, fancy bedroom that was bigger than the entire shack she'd grown up in. She'd barely slept, her mind racing with everything that had happened. Princess? True mate? Shadow Phoenix? It was like someone had taken her boring, difficult life and replaced it with the world's craziest fairy tale. A knock on her door made her jump. Come in, she called, still not used to the idea that she could give permissions like that. To her surprise, it wasn't a servant, or even Rowan who entered. It was a young Omega girl, maybe 13 years old, with mouse-brown hair and scared eyes. She was carrying a breakfast tray that was shaking in her trembling hands. Your Highness, the girl squeaked, attempting to curtsy while holding the tray. She almost dropped everything. Whoa, careful. Lyra jumped up and helped steady the tray. And please, don't call me that. Just call me Lyra. The Omega girl's eyes went wide with shock. I couldn't. You're the princess, and you're an alpha. Omegas can't address alphas by their first names. Says who? Lyra asked, setting the tray on a table. That's a stupid rule. What's your name? Sarah. You're high. Princess, Sarah, Lyra said gently, smiling at the terrified girl. That's a pretty name. Would you like to have breakfast with me? This is way too much food for one person. Sarah looked like Lyra had just suggested they fly to the moon. Omegas don't eat with royalty. Well, this royal says they do, Lyra said firmly. Besides, until yesterday everyone thought I was an Omega too. I know what it's like, Sarah. I know how badly Omegas are treated, and now that I'm apparently in a position to change things. She paused, remembering the prophecy about bringing change. Let's just say things are going to be different around here. Meanwhile, in the throne room, Rowan was dealing with a full-scale revolt from his nobles. This is unacceptable, Lord Marcus slammed his fist on the table. You cannot seriously mean to make that wild girl our queen. She is my mate and your princess, Rowan said coldly. Your opinion on the matter is irrelevant. She's dangerous, Lady Catherine added. You saw that shadow power. What if she loses control and kills us all? The only danger here, Rowan growled, his eyes flashing, is what will happen to anyone who threatens her. I've been patient with all of you, but my patience has limits. Perhaps, a smooth voice said from the doorway, we should let the princess prove herself. Everyone turned to see Lord Vincent entering. He was Rowan's advisor, a clever wolf who always seemed to know exactly what to say. But there was something in his eyes that Rowan didn't like, a calculating look that made his wolf growl internally. What do you mean? Rowan asked suspiciously. A test, Vincent suggested. The princess claims she wants to help the Omegas, correct? Let her prove she can handle royal responsibilities. Give her a challenge. If she succeeds, the nobles will accept her. If she fails... He shrugged elegantly. Absolutely not, Rowan started, but then Lyra's voice came from the doorway. I'll do it. Everyone spun around to see Lyra standing there, dressed in a simple but elegant dress that made her look every inch a princess. Sarah, the Omega, was standing behind her, looking terrified, but also oddly proud. You don't have to prove anything to them, Rowan said immediately. Yes, I do, Lyra said firmly. They're right to be worried. I show up out of nowhere with scary powers I can't control, and no idea how to be royal. If I'm going to be their queen someday, I need to earn their respect. She looked directly at Lord Vincent. What's the challenge? Vincent smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. There's a dispute in the eastern provinces. 2 packs are on the verge of war over territory rights. Previous attempts at negotiation have failed. If you can resolve the conflict peacefully within 3 days, we will accept your position, Rowan growled. That conflict has been going on for years. No one has been able to solve it. Then it should be a suitable challenge for someone who claims they'll bring great change to our kingdom, Lady Catherine said sweetly, though her eyes were cold. I'll do it, Lyra said again, more firmly. But I have conditions. Oh? Vincent raised an eyebrow. First, Sarah comes with me as my assistant, Lyra said, ignoring the gasps of shock. An Omega as a royal assistant? Unheard of. Second, I want a complete report on how Omegas are treated in those provinces. And third, she looked directly at Rowan. You come with me, not to solve it for me, but just to be there. Rowan's hard expression softened slightly. Always, he said simply. Their marks pulsed with warm light, and for a moment, everyone in the room could feel the power of their mate bond. It was like standing in sunshine after a long winter. Then it settled, Lord Vincent said, though he looked less pleased than he had a moment ago. 3 days, Princess. We'll be watching. As the nobles filed out, Rowan moved closer to Lyra. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Yes, I do, she replied. Not for them, but for me. I need to know if I can handle this, if I really am meant to be queen. And, she paused, the purple light flickering in her mark for just a moment. I need to know if I can control whatever this shadow thing is before it hurts someone. You won't hurt anyone, Rowan said with complete confidence. How do you know? He smiled, and it transformed his whole face from scary king to just a young man looking at his mate. Because I know you. Even when we first met and you were in chains, terrified and facing death, you didn't lash out. You didn't hurt anyone. Your first instinct is to protect, not destroy. That shadow power is part of you, which means it's not evil. It's just different. Lyra felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever had such faith in her before. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Good, Rowan said, surprising her. Fear keeps us careful, but don't let it control you. You're the Shadow Phoenix, remember? You're meant to burn away the old to make room for the new. Maybe that's exactly what this kingdom needs. 3 days later, Lyra stood between 2 angry alpha wolves who looked ready to tear each other apart. The Eastern Province dispute had been even worse than described. The 2 packs had been fighting over a piece of land that contained a sacred moonstone mine. Both claimed ancestral rights, and neither would budge. This is pointless, Alpha Derek of the Storm Pack snarled. That land has belonged to my family for generations. Liar, Alpha Marcus of the River Pack snapped back. My grandfather discovered that mine. Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the shadow power stir inside her. Over the past 3 days, she'd started to understand it better. It wasn't evil. It was just different. Where her golden royal power was warm and commanding, the shadow power was cool and mysterious. It showed her things others couldn't see, truths hidden in darkness. You're both right, she said suddenly, and both alphas turned to stare at her. And you're both wrong. What? They said in unison. Lyra walked to the disputed land border, where the Moonstone mine entrance gleamed in the afternoon sun. Sarah followed with a stack of old documents they'd found in the archives, while Rowan stood guard, ready to protect his mate if needed. The Storm Pack did own this land for generations, Lyra said, her silver eyes beginning to glow. And the River Pack's grandfather did discover the mine, but you're all forgetting someone, the Omegas who actually work in the mine. Both alphas scoffed. Omegas don't matter in territory disputes, Alpha Derek said dismissively. Lyra's marks flashed purple, and suddenly every shadow in the area seemed to deepen and reach toward the alpha who had spoken. They do now, she said, her voice carrying that strange double tone that meant the shadow phoenix was close to the surface. Sarah, show them what we found. Sarah, though nervous, stepped forward with the documents. These are employment records from the mine going back 50 years, she said in her quiet voice. For all that time, Omegas from both packs have worked together in the mine. They share the labor, the danger, and barely any of the profits. So here's what's going to happen, Lyra announced, her power making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. The mine will be declared neutral territory, jointly owned by both packs, but... She held up a hand as both alphas started to protest. The Omegas who work it will receive 40% of all profits. They'll use that money to build a school where Omega children from both packs can get an education. That's outrageous, Alpha Marcus spluttered. No, Lyra said, and now the shadow power was fully present, making her seem taller, more imposing, absolutely impossible to deny. What's outrageous is that you've both gotten rich off the backs of Omegas you treat as worthless. That changes now. She turned to address the crowd that had gathered, wolves from both packs, including many Omegas who had never been allowed to attend such meetings before. This is the new way, Lyra announced, her voice carrying across the field. Omegas are not lesser. They are not shadows to be ignored. They are part of our packs, our families, our future. Any alpha who disagrees can take it up with me and my mate. Rowan stepped forward, his own power radiating outward, making it clear he stood with her completely. Faced with the combined might of the king and the shadow phoenix, both alphas had no choice but to submit. They signed the agreement Lyra had drawn up, and for the first time in history, Omegas were given legal rights to property and profits. As they traveled back to the palace, Sarah couldn't stop smiling. You did it, she said to Lyra in wonder. You actually changed things. Those Omegas. They were crying with joy. No one has ever stood up for them before. It's just the beginning, Lyra promised. There's so much more work to do. When they arrived at the palace, the nobles were waiting in the throne room. Lord Vincent stepped forward, clearly expecting to hear that she had failed. Well? He asked with a smirk. How did your little negotiation go? Lyra smiled, and it was the smile of a queen who knew exactly how powerful she was. The conflict is resolved. Both packs signed a peace treaty, and I've established the kingdom's first Omega education fund. The noble's jaws dropped. Even Lady Catherine looked impressed despite herself. That's impossible, Lord Marcus stammered. That conflict has lasted for decades. The old ways failed for decades, Lyra corrected. So I tried something new. Isn't that what the Shadow Phoenix is supposed to do? Burn away the old to make way for the new? Sage Matthias smiled proudly. The prophecy unfolds exactly as foretold. You are bringing the change our kingdom desperately needs. Rowan took Lyra's hand, their matching marks glowing with warm golden light. "My mate, my queen," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Our kingdom is stronger with you in it." But even as everyone celebrated, Lyra could feel the shadow power stirring restlessly inside her. It had helped her today, shown her truths others couldn't see. But she knew this was just the beginning. The power was growing stronger every day, and with it came visions, glimpses of dangers approaching the kingdom, threats that would require both her light and shadow to defeat. "You okay?" Rowan asked quietly, noticing her distant expression. "Yeah," Lyra said, squeezing his hand. "Just thinking about the future. There's something coming, Rowan. I can feel it in the shadows. Something big." "Whatever it is," he said firmly, "we'll face it together. The king and the shadow phoenix. Light and dark united." Lyra smiled, feeling the truth of his words in her very soul. She had started this journey as a nobody Omega accused of theft. Now she was a princess, a future queen, a mate to the most powerful alpha in the kingdom, and apparently some kind of mystical chosen one with scary shadow powers. It was a lot for anyone to handle. But as she looked around the throne room, at Sarah beaming with pride, at the nobles reluctantly accepting her authority, at Rowan standing strong beside her, she knew she could do this. The Omega who everyone had dismissed as worthless was going to change everything, and this was only the beginning. As the sun set outside the palace windows, Lyra's mark pulsed once more, shadow and light swirling together in perfect harmony. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever darkness threatened their kingdom, she would be ready. After all, she was the shadow phoenix, and phoenixes were really, really good at rising from the ashes to become something magnificent.